Hello. Welcome to part 2 of Nintendo Deep Dive's Nintendo 3DS Showcase. Last time, in part 1, we went through the features of the 3DS, and we even touched on some of the software up through 2012, releases in 2012. So we are going to continue on, starting with releases in 2013. So, getting started here. The first release, big notable release in 2013 was Fire Emblem Awakening, which up to this point, the series had been flagging, and this was meant to be a lost hurrah. And a last hurrah it certainly was. Well, a hurrah anyway, because this game was jam-packed with content and would go on to be the resurrection of the franchise, if you will, as it did very well on the 3DS. It's definitely a favorite of mine on the 3DS, maybe my second or third favorite game. And yeah, Fire Emblem has been enjoying popularity ever since. And for the game itself, I really enjoy the characters and the story, not as much, though it certainly has its moments. The characters, though, Stahl, Chrom, Frederick, Vake, Varian, Shershay. It's a pretty strong roster of characters for a Fire Emblem game. And the gameplay, while I would echo sentiments from the more hardcore fans that it's maybe a touch too casual and lenient, even so, it's definitely a fun time, and there's still a good amount of challenge in it. It's just a great game to pick up and do a run through, even though that might take me about 40 hours. But this, it came out in February 24th or February 4th of 2013, and I would consider this the first real critical darling on the 3DS, and kind of when the 3DS was peaking, as far as I see it. After Fire Emblem Awakening, we got Etrian Odyssey 4, which I have not played Etrian Odyssey 4 or any other Etrian Odyssey game. Those games started on the DS. They really took advantage of the touchscreen on the DS, giving you the ability to draw maps and such. And that feature, of course, continued onto the 3DS. And the purpose of drawing maps is to make your way through a dungeon or a series of dungeons, as it is a dungeon crawler. After Etrian Odyssey came out in March, we received Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, which is a port of Monster Hunter Tri, but it features the G rank. So kind of a new game with all that extra content from the G rank. And just like with Etrian Odyssey 4, those games exist on a different micro SD, so they are represented by these bottles. of all things. And after Monster Hunter 3, we got, in March 24th, 2013, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. Which Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon was a sequel, the first sequel to Luigi's Mansion, which came out in 2001. So definitely a long wait between the two of them. The game is really nice to look at on the 3DS, and it really shows off the 3DS well, or the 3D, pardon me, well. And the game's quite a bit of fun. Not necessarily as good as the first, in my opinion, but definitely a AAA experience on this handheld. Following Luigi's Mansion, we got Dylan's Rolling Western, The Last Ranger, which this game has a predecessor that I don't own, but the titles are very similar, with the second one being better, so I went with the second one. And again, this came out on April 11th, 2013, if I didn't mention that already. The game sees you essentially doing a tower defense kind of gameplay with a character that can move around very fast in a Sonic-esque way, as he is a armadillo. All within the backdrop of a Western society, or Western-esque society. I haven't played the game, but I look forward to playing it. And then in May, early May, Mario and Donkey Minis on the Move came out. This is different than Mario vs. Donkey Kong, as rather than being a side-scroller, a puzzle side-scroller, it is now isometric, and the main thrust of the game's game's gameplay is placing path blocks in front of your minis, so that they can get to the end of the level as needed. I also haven't played this one, but it looked really cool. And then after Minis on the Move came out, on June 9th, 2013, the 3DS got a second critical darling in the form of Animal Crossing New Leaf. I was looking for the subtitle there. It's right up there. I have made attempts to get into this game, but I have not as of yet. But as I understand, this is supposed to be the peak of Animal Crossing, or many people consider it to be. Maybe other people consider New Horizons what they want out of the series, but New Leaf, it's definitely the peak of that, of old Animal Crossing anyway, for those fans. And the game has lots and lots of features, and like all other Animal Crossings, there's an emphasis on the time of the day, the time of the seasons, and holidays. And the game is constantly moving to a real-time clock that you can manipulate if you feel bothered to do so, but maybe that goes against the point of Animal Crossing for many people. Yeah, this game was really well liked when it came out, and it got a substantial free update in 2016 or 2017 maybe. I think it was 2016. And for many people, this remains the best Animal Crossing. I just need a drink. After Animal Crossing, sometime after Animal Crossing, in August, we got SteamWorld Dig, which I believe I also don't have downloaded on this micro SD card. These SD cards only take 32 gigs, or the 3DS only takes 32 gigs of micro SD storage. So even if you have a 64 gig, it will cap it. It will cap at 32 gigs. But actually, I have SteamWorld Dig right here. There. This is a procedurally generated adventure game where your entire reason for living, I guess, to put it that way, is to dig down into the earth for treasure. And after you find treasure, cash it in and just keep digging down. This was a very well-liked small studio game, and it continues on as its own franchise and continues to be well-liked. I played it for maybe 6 hours. I think I stopped just before the end. I should probably go back to it, though. But that's SteamWorld Dig. And it came out on many systems, but the 3DS was the platform of choice, or the 3DS or the Vita. So after SteamWorld Dig, just a few days after, we got Mario and Luigi Dream Team, which it's a bit odd to me that I have it in a Smash Brothers case. But, well, let's just fish it out of there. Oh, I understand now. I understand. So Mario and Luigi Dream Team. Sorry, I can't really get a good image of it. Mario and Luigi Dream Team is a Mario and Luigi RPG, with its main gimmick being that you are playing the entire game in Luigi's mind. And on the bottom screen, you will have a sleeping Luigi, and you can manipulate him in his sleep, such as itch his nose to make him sneeze, or tickle him or pull on his ear, and that will cause him to create changes in the dream world above his head, on the top screen, where you will be doing most of your playing, which actually sounds like a really cool idea. And there's also a mode where you can control 100 Luigis at a time, which is neat to say the least. So after Mario and Luigi Dream Team, we got a second Etrian Odyssey game. This being Etrian Odyssey Untold Millennium Girl, which is a remake of the first game. I believe featuring a story, an actual narrative. Otherwise very similar to Etrian Odyssey 4, which I'm told these are very good dungeon crawler games. So I don't know if I have much to say about it otherwise. And then after that, we got, oh, pardon me, if I have it. Yes, here we go. We got Ace Attorney Dual Destinies, which is an Ace Attorney game, which is basically a courtroom drama visual novel that was quite popular on the DS. Originally came out on the GBA, I believe, but this is the fifth game, and I believe it was very much approved by fans of that series. I haven't played it yet, but I look forward to doing so. And that came out in October, late or mid-October. Then, after Phoenix Wright Dual Destinies, we got A Legend of Zelda: Link Between Worlds, which this digital copy of came with my special Zelda version of my 3DS, or that version anyway. And again, I don't know where that particular 3DS is, but this game came with it. And Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds is also considered to be a critical darling on this system. It featured a new mechanic where you could merge with the walls and move around as a painting. And that entailed a lot of really interesting puzzles and problem-solving moments. While not my favorite Zelda game, for many people it is among their favorites. And for myself, it's a nice, fun, breezy playthrough, which sometimes I get a hankering to play through it, and I can get through it in about 10 hours. So that's nice. So after Link Between Worlds came out in after Link Between Worlds came out in November of 2013, the next game we have here is which came out in February of 2014, is Bravely Default, which was a very, very cool old school RPG done by Square Enix. I don't know if it was Square Enix proper, but one of their teams, certainly. And it had this mechanic where you could brave or default. If you braved, it meant you could do consecutive attacks, one after the other, without giving the enemy a turn. But after those attacks were done, then the enemy could attack you without recourse from you for that predetermined period of time. The game has great music, from what I've heard, though I haven't played it myself, and it's considered the RPG on the 3DS, unless I'm mistaken. And then after Bravely Default, we had Professor Layton and the Azran Legacy, which came out in February 2014. And it is yet another Professor Layton game. I don't know if it's as well liked as the Miracle Mask, but the game has a really strong presentation, as Miracle Mask does too, but this game looks even better than that from what I've seen. So that's all I can really say about it. And then after Professor Layton came out, we got Mario Golf World Tour, which for a Mario sports game, this is considered among the best of them, featuring a lot of content, a lot of characters, and in terms of a lot of content delving into that, it features 10 courses to start with, I believe 5 or 6 more to be purchased for a generally modest sum. And those DLC courses were the best courses too, or among the best anyway. This is a game that I only hear about it in positive terms. So I'm definitely looking forward to playing that. And that came out in May of 2014. And after Mario Golf World Tour came out, we got our first Kirby game on the 3DS. Kirby Triple Deluxe, which, speaking of games that, or going back to games that really use the 3D effect well, this game used it very well, with lots of jumping between the foreground and the background, and lots of hazards that would push you against the screen should you get in their way. And otherwise, 3D effect aside, this is just a very beautiful game. Like all Kirby games, very easy, but I think that this game had a lot of good instances of level design and visual design. Just a super solid Kirby game with some really great power-ups, such as the spear and the bow. I liked using both of those a lot, but I especially liked the spear, as it was very versatile and it had a lot of reach. And in this game, there was this mini game where you were DDD, doing a drum dash where you dashed across the surfaces of drums to one of the famous Kirby songs, and it was a lot of fun. that is Kirby Triple Deluxe. Then, after Kirby Triple Deluxe, we got Tamagotchi Life, which is a game about taking all your Miis and putting them on an island and just observing them. I believe you can do some manipulation to, have things go a certain way, but really the game is all about observing all your different Miis in very absurd situations, and it's a very unique experience. Unlike any other experience. Similar to Animal Crossing, but not really. But, a little similar, but not really. And that came out, Kirby came out May 2nd alongside Mario Golf World Tour, and Tamagotchi Life came out in June of 2014. And after Tamagotchi Life came out, we had Shovel Knight come out on the 3DS on the 26th of June in 2014. Though I do not have an image of it here other than this bottle as a loose representation of it. Shovel Knights are really great platformer. And the 3DS version really utilized the 3D well, from what I've seen and heard. So, even though you might prefer to buy it on a console like the Wii U at the time, there was actually a good reason to get it on the 3DS if you really liked playing games on the go and liked seeing the 3D in effect. So, yeah, that was Shovel Knight. And after Shovel Knight came out in August, late August, the 29th of August of 2014, we got Azura Striker Gunvolt, which is a game done by, I believe, Inti Creates. And this game is kind of like a Mega Man X game, except the way you kill enemies is with this AoE electromagnetic pulse shield of some kind. The sprite work on this game is beautiful. The voice acting I could take or leave, but the sprites are beautiful. It's pretty much a AAA game, or at least a AA game, even though it's pixel art, because the pixel art is really good. And after Azure Striker Gunvolt came out, we got a crossover on the same day, actually, as Azure Striker Gunvolt, August 29th. We got a crossover between Professor Layton and Phoenix Wright, titled Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright. And I haven't played this game. All I know is that there is a mixture of puzzle sections and trial sections, and that the two, as the title would indicate, are actually opposed to each other through most of the game's duration. It wasn't seen as the best of either franchise, but it is still a cool crossover nonetheless, and it was well received. And after Professor Layton came out, sometime in October, early October, the next big game to come out was Super Smash Bros. For 3DS. While not the most creative name, Super Smash Bros. For 3DS was very creative. It had so many new characters, a lot of smart new character additions like Little Mac and Villager and Bowser Jr., Rosalina Luma, Wii Fit Trainer, and more besides. But like such as Robin from Fire Emblem Awakening, who I really like. But this again, this was a console experience on a handheld, and the game was very visually impressive. It definitely didn't look as good as the Wii U version if you looked close enough. And as we can see, we have Mario Sports here. Maybe I should fix that. But, playing it in motion and, even just looking at it, just generally, it was a very good looking game for the system it was on, and it had a great style where the characters had these beautiful hard lines on them. It's a pretty cool booklet. And there's one mode in this game called Smash Run, which was essentially a continuation of City Trials from Kirby's Air Ride. That's a nice pack-in. And that was a really fun mode because while there was only one stage, the stage was so big that you would probably never see its entirety in one go, or you would at least get the sense that you never saw its entirety because you would never see it all at once. And that made it fun to run around that stage or that mode multiple times, just looking around, seeing if there was something you missed, some section you didn't see between the sections you had seen, somewhere where they didn't overlap. In that stage also, the mode rather, it featured many different characters from many different franchises, and they were actually quite tough. And there was always a challenge at the end that you really couldn't plan for, but you just gathered what you could to beef up your stats. And the stages in this game were also really good. It didn't actually have too many stages, maybe 30 of them, but they were really nice vignettes of handheld titles such as Spirit Tracks and Ocarina of Time 3D and Tamagotchi Life, Kid Icarus Uprising, lots of good stuff. And this cover here, I really like it. I like this view of them from the side, and I do like that Link is featured most prominently because I like Zelda more than Mario. But that's a small thing, but I think that's that's a pretty strong art design, a box art design there. And then after Smash Brothers, we got on October 24th, 2014, Fantasy Life. Just move that around. Fantasy Life, done by Level 5, I believe, is a game where you can pick any job or any lifestyle you want and go with it for as many as 40 hours. It's quite a big game. It's a bit mellow, but there's lots of choices, and you get to see each of those choices through the duration of an entire game, which is pretty cool. And it's very charming, its art style and its music too. And yeah, pretty mellow, but it's kind of like an Animal Crossing with more of a narrative to push you along, I guess. More objective. I got my bottles messed up, but that doesn't matter. After Fantasy Life came out in October, apparently we got this in 2014. I did not realize. We got Ultimate NES Remix, which I suppose is kind of just a port of the Wii U title. But it combines both games, NES Remix and NES Remix 2 on the Wii U, into just one title, taking the best games from each of those two games. And NES Remix is a real fun time, because it gives you little vignettes of the NES library. And then after which it builds on these special challenges and these remixed challenges, if you will. So I guess I considered this its own game because it's a different composition from the Wii U titles. Hopefully it's actually a trimmed down version of those, because those Wii U games did have some fat on them. And so having a portable experience that's maybe a little more selective with what it wants to show you, that sounds appealing to me. And it does have its own mini games as well, such as Super Mario Brothers 2 and Double Time with, twice the speed. So yeah, that was the end of that was in November, or on November 7th of 2014. I apologize that I talk poorly. A failure to use prepositions properly. And then after that, filling in for Persona Q, which came out November 25th, 2014, we have this bottle for download play, this little bottle icon, which Persona Q is essentially a Etrian Odyssey game. I believe it is, but with Persona characters. And it was quite well received and probably has a bit more personality than the typical Etrian Odyssey game. So I jumped on that and purchased it. And then December 11th, 2014, we got Xeodrifter, another game by Renegade Kid. But this game was more of a Metroid-style game. And the same thing that you saw in Super Mutant Mudds, where you could jump between the foreground, the midground, and the background, was also present in Xeodrifter. And in an exploration title, it actually worked really well and was very exciting. This game I actually really enjoyed quite a bit. And so that is 2014 in a nutshell. On February 13th of 2015, we got Majora's Mask, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask 3D, which was a long sought after remaster of the cult classic, though it's not really much of a cult classic anymore. It's just a classic, Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask on the N64, a game that I was just recently playing on the channel. And this game, this remake of it, very beautiful, has some really great features. And it even has a camera stick so you can swivel around and look around the world of Majora's Mask just a little more easily. New graphics like Ocarina of Time that look really beautiful, maybe a little too beautiful. And just lots of little changes here and there. It's not my preferred way to play Majora's Mask, but it's definitely like a cool remake of that game. And I'm glad I have it on here. And then on the same day as Majora's Mask, we got Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, which was a big step forward for the series. In many ways, you had new weapons classes, new monsters, but you also had this new element where there was verticality added to the stages, so you could jump up into the air onto the monsters or jump off a cliff onto the monsters to mount them and do damage to them in that way. I do not have that game downloaded on this SD card. I know. It's a story you've heard many times by now. But yeah, Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate was a very good Monster Hunter game. Very beautiful, too, for what it was on the 3DS. And so after Monster Hunter, HAL Laboratories released a cool little puzzle game called Box Boy, which you can kind of see it play out in the title, what Box Boy is. It's a very simplistic looking puzzle game where you create boxes as an extension of yourself, and you can lay them or use them to hook onto ledges and do whatever. It's a very cool puzzle game. Very simple, but very cool. It came out for like $5. Super great title on the 3DS, and basically deserves to be mentioned alongside bigger titles. And after Box Boy came out, interesting. After Box Boy came out in April, there was a drought of games, for the most part anyway, at least for the games I own, until Triforce Heroes in October of 2015. This is a multiplayer-focused Zelda title, which turned some people off, and some people didn't really like its single-player options, which its single-player options weren't good, but the game was designed around multiplayer, and it really functions well within those parameters. I actually really enjoyed Triforce Heroes. There was a lot of cool things about it. The levels were a lot of fun to play, featuring a lot of good puzzles and activities and challenges. There was 40 or so costumes that you could unlock with their own special benefits to help you and your teammates. I remember, well, I'm not going to get into that, but let's just say, the costumes added a lot, and the game was fun in multiplayer, and I really enjoyed it. And after Triforce Heroes in December of 2015, we got SteamWorld Heist, which was a turn-based, almost XCOM-esque strategy RPG from Image and Form, who did SteamWorld Dig. And it was a pretty fun game. I beat the main story. I didn't really get far in the DLC, but the big gimmick with SteamWorld Heist was that you could ricochet bullets off walls to hit enemies that were hiding behind cover. So that's SteamWorld Heist. Then in 2016, in January of 2016, the next game to come out was Final Fantasy Explorers, which I have this red bottle standing in for. Final Fantasy Explorers was essentially a take on the Monster Hunter franchise, but with the Final Fantasy property. By the looks of it, it looks to be a very, very good game, or a very interesting one at least. It looks really nice graphically. Maybe not as good as Monster Hunter, but I picked it up, and it's on another SD card. And after Final Fantasy Explorers, in February, we got another Fire Emblem game. Actually, two other Fire Emblem games. Fire Emblem Fates Conquest and Fire Emblem Fates Birthright. Conquest was a game for hardcore, old school Fire Emblem fans, and it really delivered on that, being very difficult, but also very satisfying to play with very intricate maps to fight on. Like some really good maps. And it's definitely my favorite of the two, and I'm not sure if I like it more than Birthright, but or not Birthright, Awakening, but I very well might. The story and the characters aren't as good as Awakenings, but the gameplay is really awesome. For both Fates games, what they did, they made the pairing up system, which I don't know if I mentioned in this video or not, but the pairing up system made for Fire Emblem Awakening, where it was imbalanced in that game, they did a great job of balancing it out with the rest of the gameplay in Fire Emblem Conquest and Birthright. Which Birthright, it's a little more like Awakening in terms of its difficulty and its map design and its leveling up options, a little more casual. It's not particularly well loved, but it is still, I would say, a great game. A lesser great game, but a great game. With a great box art. The story It's probably even worse than Conquest, maybe. But still a lot of fun gameplay and actually a few fun characters too, such as Oboro. I've only played it once. Conquest I've played twice. There was, of course, a third version of Fire Emblem Fates called Fire Emblem Revelations, but that game was less substantial in terms of new content than Birthright or Conquest, so I don't really consider it a third release, even though you could probably argue it's almost like a third new game entirely. But it borrows a lot from both of those games. And in both of those games, well, for both of those games, you have one family that you're with and you're fighting against the other family, depending on which game you're playing. So it's cool to be fighting characters that you're then fighting with as you do the next game. So that is Fire Emblem Fates, both versions, which came out February 19th, 2016. And then after that, in June of 2016, we got, surprised isn't here, Kirby Planet Robobot, which is another Kirby game, very similar to Kirby Triple Deluxe, except the big conceit with this one was that you walked around in a robotic mech that could also copy abilities. And it was kind of just one big power trip. It's considered to be one of the best 2D side-scroller Kirbys. I don't know if I have anything to say against that, but I think I might prefer Triple Deluxe over it. And then after that, that came out in June of 2016. Also coming out in June of 2016, we got Box Boy, which was the sequel to Box Boy. There was some differences, but it's another Box Boy game, and it was a lot of fun, but maybe my least favorite of the three potentially. And then after Box Boy in July, pretty busy summer for the 3DS, we got Monster Hunter Generations, which was in one part a greatest hits of the Monster Hunter franchise, and other parts it was pushing the gameplay of the franchise anyway, forward in really radical ways. The big thing with Generations, sorry, I'm really just looking at Sergio's there on the back, and he looks really good. The big thing in terms of gameplay with Monster Hunter Generations was that you could pick different styles in terms of how you wanted to fight. There was the Bushido, Aerial, Guild, I think maybe 2 or 3 others. and they would drastically change how the game played. If you picked aerial, which 80% of people did, you could jump up in the air and come down with a strike on top of the monster and mount the monster. It was actually quite imbalanced, but it was cool at the time. And then with Bushido, you did counterattacks, kind of like a samurai sort of thing. And Guild was more the traditional Monster Hunter gameplay, but there was really good buffs with it. Yeah, it was, again, it was kind of a greatest hits of Monster Hunter, featuring all the old maps and many of the old monsters, though there may have been a few new ones too. A lot of content and definitely its own game, ultimately, even though it was calling back to old things with all the different styles. There was, definitely its own game. And after that, after Monster Hunter Generations, which me and my brother had quite a bit of fun with, in August of 2016, a game came out that was very maligned and very hated, but I don't think anybody actually played it, so they really couldn't say if it was all that terrible. But I did, and I actually kind of enjoyed it, and that was Metroid Prime Federation Force. And typically, Metroid games are single-player affairs, very solitary adventures. But Metroid Prime Federation Force was a 3-player or 4-player. I think it was a 4-player cooperative game where you did some exploration, but it was mostly mission-based levels where you cooperated to get to the end. And there was some real great missions there. Some asymmetrical gameplay with some players outside of their big mechs while other players were protecting them as inside the mech that you're normally in. There's some really fun missions, such as the mission where you are escorting a cart full of ore with a giant mounted gun on top of that cart. That was pretty fun. There was a lot of variety in the game. The character design was a little rough, I'll say, but outside of that, if the game was given a chance, I don't know. There's no reason that one wouldn't have enjoyed it. Anyway, no one's actually played this game for the most part, but I really enjoyed it, or I enjoyed it. I don't know if I really enjoyed it. It's hard to say. I had a nebulously good time with it, and I haven't touched it since the day after it came out, but I did beat it. So after Metroid Prime Federation Force, Phoenix Wright Spirit of Justice came out September 8th. I have not played it. Again, I only have a bottle to represent it, but I do own it. There's not much I can say about it. And then after Spirit of Justice came out, also in September, we got Azer Striker Gunvolt 2. More of the same, very beautiful art style. Though I think this game featured a more typical Mega Man-like character in it, as opposed to Azer Striker or Gunvolt, whatever his name is. Otherwise, it's just a sequel to that. Very good-looking game. And then, in December of 2016, not a bad 2016 by any means, we got a very strange port of Super Mario Maker for Nintendo 3DS. And I say port, but that's not really true. It's kind of its own game. It has very stripped down sharing features. You can make levels, but you can't really share them in an easy way. Unless you have the Wii U version, though you can share the levels locally. It's very complicated, but the reason I consider this its own game is because it actually has its own single player with 100 different levels. And those different levels are actually really creative and really cool. And so there is a hidden Mario game developed by Nintendo in this one, which is why I thought I should own it. And why I consider it its own game from Mario Maker on the Wii U. Though for the making portion, you definitely want to own a Wii U version of that game. But if you're out on the go, I suppose it would be handy to be making levels on the 3DS. Though with the Switch out and Mario Maker 2, you can kind of have both. But at the time, it was probably pretty handy. So after Mario Maker came out, that marked the end of big releases in 2016. So the next game to come out in 2017. Well, I have Mutant Mudds here, but I don't think I counted that as a big release. But we'll see. The next big game to come out was... also MIA. Here. Next big game to come out was Tank Troopers, which it wasn't a very big game, but it was a fun little online multiplayer game where you fought against other people in tanks. And there was a single player to it as well. Definitely a smaller game done by one of Nintendo's smaller studios, or their second party studios. But yeah, it sounded cool and I own it, and I will let those on the channel know what I think of it when I get to it. And that came out in February. In March of 2017, we got Mario Sports Superstars. Now this game, it wasn't really well liked when it came out, but I think with some perspective, I think this is actually a pretty solid title. The big thing with this title is it is 5 sports in one: soccer, golf, tennis, horse racing, and what would the 5th mystery one be? Baseball. But the 5 sports, they're a little more, or they can be either simple or they don't have a lot of content built around them. But when you have 5 sports in one game, I think it should be your expectation that the sports, each of them is going to be a little less developed than one sport might be in a Mario sports game, just about that one sport. And from what I've seen, there's actually a bit of depth to each sport. You will run out of content if you just focus on one of them. But the golf and the tennis, they seem to be just the same mechanics ripped out of Mario Golf World Tour and Mario Tennis Open, with far less courts and courses. But even so, solid mechanics, solid little tennis game to play. One of 5 games of, well, just one of 5 sports games you could be playing. And the horse racing actually looked pretty interesting. And, I don't know, it wasn't well liked when it came out, but considering where some of their other sports titles currently are on the Switch, not to get too into that, I think Mario Sports Superstars would be more well received nowadays. And for my own part, I think there's some value in it because it's online, so you can play with your friends online and you can switch to another sport when you get bored of the one you're playing. So there's my little defense of Mario Sports Superstars, even though I haven't played it too much. After Mario Sports Superstars came out, we had Bye Bye Box Boy, which I do not have it on here. This little pearl represents it, though. Another Box Boy game, very fun. It added just lots of little one-off gimmicks that were cool, such as rocket boxes. And then after Bye Bye Box Boy came out in April, on May 19th, we got Fire Emblem Echoes, which I have a copy of that game, but I lent it out and it hasn't come back to me yet. Otherwise, Fire Emblem Echoes is a very great Fire Emblem game. Has the best story of the Fire Emblem games on the 3DS. Super fun combat, the best production value. It's a remake, like a real remake of Fire Emblem Gaiden. So it will be familiar to some people, but that story's really good. The music's really good. Production's really good. And the gameplay's also really good. That could be my favorite Fire Emblem, and is probably my favorite Fire Emblem so far. But I don't have a copy of it. Just empty hands at the moment. And after Fire Emblem Echoes came out in June 23rd of 2017, we got a game called Ever Oasis, which was a game developed by Grezzo, who were the people responsible for the Zelda remakes. And so with that in mind, Ever Oasis was essentially a mixture of a Zelda game with a life sim. And the life sim part is where you build up an oasis in the desert. And the Zelda part was where you would go into dungeons of some kind with multiple characters that had their own kind of lock and key abilities that you would utilize to move forward in those dungeons. It wasn't loved when it came out, and it essentially was buried by the release of the Switch some months prior. But Ever Oasis looks promising to me, and there are people who really enjoy it, and the game looks quite beautiful with its chibi art style, which is not something I typically love, but it looks like a really nice game. And then after Ever Oasis, August 17th, we got Chicken Wiggle, which is a game that, in addition to being a platformer, also done by not Renegade Kid, but Atui, which is of Renegade Kid. Chicken Wiggle is a game that features both a platforming single player and also a level editor. And it seemed like a pretty beefy, small studio game, so I thought I would also include it in my Nintendo 3DS catalog. After Chicken Wiggle, on September 15th, 2017, we got Metroid Samus Returns, which was the first 2D Metroid game to come out in 13 years, and the first Metroid game, like the first Metroid game proper, in 7 years. And this game was really good. And it's a remake of Metroid 2, Return of Samus. So the premise is the exact same, but the gameplay is basically entirely different. Really, really great game. And not much more I can say about it other than really fantastic boss fights, even though you fight Gamma Metroids a little too often. And after Samus Returns, we got a Etrian Odyssey game, Etrian Odyssey 5. Can't really say anything more about that. In 2017, October 2017. And then we got SteamWorld Dig 2 in February of 2018. And then in May, we got Dylan's Dead Heat Breakers, which was the third Dylan's Rolling Western game, except this was actually kind of a console release, though it still, from what I hear, had that sense of being a small studio title. I haven't played it, but yeah, it did seem, well, it seemed bigger, but maybe, definitely a worthwhile game on a handheld, and what you'd expect on a handheld console, even though the 3DS, as I was saying, was pushing past those expectations. And then I really don't have much to say about SteamWorld Dig 2 or Etrian Odyssey or Dylan's Dead Heat Breakers. SteamWorld Dig 2 is supposed to be really great. But the last game to really come out that mattered on the 3DS came out August 3rd, 2018, and that was WarioWare Gold, which is a greatest hits of WarioWare games, featuring games that use the gyroscope from the vein of WarioWare Twisted, touchscreen games like from WarioWare Touched, and just button games like from WarioWare Micro Games. And it features those games that you saw in all of those titles, as well as new games as well, with a new presentation. Not the most original title, but a really nice package, and certainly enough to be considered its own game. So yeah, I played it. I've been enjoying it. And with that, I think that's basically everything that came out that I own for the Nintendo 3DS. And, well, it's definitely not a small library of games. As I said, there's about 100 games worth owning on the 3DS. And of the games that I talked about, I have 70 of those, which Yeah, that's a very beefy library. And I just wanted to share them with you. Going forward, the good news is that my other game collections will be predominantly physical, which I know is much more tantalizing. But the people voted and they wanted to see my 3DS collection. So there it is. I hope you enjoyed watching this and look forward to more game collections. This was Carl of Nintendo Deep Dive. Thank you.